Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Oklahoma wheat producers have quite a bit of grain in storage. They've been holding out for higher prices, but now some of them are adapting their strategy. Joining us now is Dave Lalman, our Extension beef cattle specialist. Dave, we've talked a lot about wheat pasture, but today we want to talk about wheat grain. What's the scenario?
So wheat is inexpensive in relation to other feed grains that beef cattle producers commonly use. And so anytime that scenario develops, it's probably worth our while to consider where we might be able to incorporate wheat into a beef cattle ration and, how much to feed and those kind of things.
So some folks are doing that, and you and your colleagues have run the numbers. Give us some analysis and what you have looked at.
Yeah, so Greg Heifel and I several years ago developed a little calculator tool, just an Excel spreadsheet tool that helps you identify kind of the break-even point at which wheat might become cost-effective to incorporate in beef cattle rations. What that tool shows is that, let's say you have a scenario where corn is around $4 a bushel and soybean meal, a protein source, is worth about $350 a bushel. Okay, so with those two ingredients, you can combine about 92% corn, 8% soybean meal, and what you wind up with is basically reconstructed wheat. Okay, so from a TDN or energy and protein standpoint. Well, today at $4 and $3.50 for the corn and soybean meal, that makes wheat worth about $4.78 a bushel as a feed grain. Well, the price of wheat is not that high, so that tells you that it should be a good feed bargain.
So say someone has run the numbers and they say, I'm gonna try this. What are the things they need to consider? What's it gonna take to put it into practice?
Yeah, there's a couple of important considerations. Number one is the grain should be processed. Okay, so if it's not processed, digestibility of the energy basically is reduced by, the research shows anywhere from 15 to 25%. So it does need to be processed. Good way to do that would be to dry roll it. Some folks would have the capability perhaps to steamroll it, which would even be better. If you have to grind it, you just want to grind it coarsely. You want to avoid trying to make a lot of small fine particles or flour, if you will, because wheat is rapidly fermented in the rumen, and so if you're not careful, you can create a situation where you might have acidosis, bloat, and founder with too fine of particles and feeding too much all at once. The second thing that folks ought to consider is the amount. A simple rule of thumb is that if you're feeding, let's say, growing cattle, a diet that's got some concentrate in it, some other source of feed grain, about half of the concentrate portion as wheat is a relatively safe way to go. So needs to be processed, and no more than about half of the concentrate portion. With those two rules of thumb, producers it should be a fairly safe practice to put some weight on, whether it be lactating cows or growing calves.
Any concerns for calving season or as we head into fall?
Not really. I mean, one advantage I don't think I mentioned is that wheat is a little bit higher in protein than corn. It'll be anywhere from 2 to maybe up to 4 percentage units higher in protein. Of course, that's good for a cow that's grazing lower quality forage this time of year. But she's going to need additional protein sources to go with that. 12 to 13% protein wheat's not going to be enough protein, so she'll still have to have supplemental protein. But that is an advantage to feeding wheat. In fact, we say that wheat has about 102 to maybe 104% of the feeding value of corn, and the reason it's a little bit higher is because of the extra protein.
Well, and as we've heard from Kim Anderson these last few weeks, there's quite a bit of it around. So
there is. The feed yards have actually been feeding wheat all summer, and so anytime they start to do that, tells us we ought to be doing the math.
Okay, Dave Lalman, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We have reminded you before that the beginning of the fall calving season often comes a little bit sooner than we might have expected just looking at the calendar, because some of those cows may calve a few days sooner than what the gestation table would actually predict. Well, that's also a reminder that we need to be getting ready for that fall calving season. And one of the key things, of course, is to get our calving kit put together, prepared, and in a place where everybody in the family knows where it's at and can reach it and bring it to you if you need some help while you're working with that cow or heifer that's having a little trouble at calving time. What do you put in a calving kit? Well, I'd start with about a 5-gallon bucket, and that's a place to put the rest of the materials that we'll mention. Some things that I would include, first of all, of course, are some disposable obstetric sleeves, plastic sleeves that you can put on yourself while you're examining that cow or heifer to see what assistance you need to apply. Also, have a non-irritant antiseptic, something that you can use to clean the outer edges of that reproductive tract before you actually enter that cow and heifer to do your examination. That way you won't be introducing some antigens into her reproductive tract. Have a lubricant in that calving kit. The easiest thing is to have a non-detergent dishwasher soap, something that's very, very inexpensive, but will work well as a lubricant to put on the sleeves as you use to actually do your examination. Of course, we need those OB chains, those calf pulling chains. Whether you use one 60-inch chain or two 30-inch chains, that's your preference, but we want to have those things clean and certainly as sterile as possible in that calving kit. Don't forget the handles. We have to have those for each one of those chains or each end of the 60-inch chain that we might be using. Be sure to include in the calving kit a plastic bottle, squirt bottle if you will, of 7% iodine solution. That's something that you can spray or dip the newborn's calf's navel to help prevent infections that could be introduced that way on that newborn calf. Certainly the simple things, but ones that are easy to forget, are have a good flashlight in that calving kit. Also, I would suggest you have some old bath towels or even a roll of paper towels to help clean up around that outside area on that heifer before you do examination. And one more thing that I would really suggest you do, especially if you have other people on your ranching operation that are going to be helping you during this calving season, is to make out what I call a calving protocol. In other words, what are the rules by which, how long do you watch a cow or a heifer during the calving process before you actually get her in and do an examination? Who should you call if you need some help? Have those telephone numbers on that calving protocol so that everybody will know who to dial to get some assistance, whether it's your local large animal veterinarian, a neighbor, or a relative that might be willing to come and help. Get that calving kit ready, put up the protocol, and I think it'll help you just save a few more calves and help the bottom line of your cow herd this calving season. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
On the subject of livestock, some guidance on treating horn flies during these dog days of summer. Here's Extension livestock entomologist Justin Talley.
So this time of year we're starting to see a lot of horn flies on cattle, and the main reason why is because of the temperatures are very conducive for this fly to develop at a very rapid pace. So just any time from August to September, that's usually when we see the highest number of horn flies on our cattle. When we think about that, it's just related to temperature and moisture to a certain extent, and what we usually see is that it can cause a lot of irritation, which causes production losses. And when you think of production losses, it's not necessarily the weight on the cow or what's affecting the cow, it's what's affecting the cow that interprets to the effect of the calf. And so essentially you see reduced milk flow, and then you see reduced cases where it's just that animal's not as efficient as it should be if it didn't have horn flies. The other things that we're concerned about if you've got stalker operators out there in beef systems is if you coming to the end of their cycle or getting ready to ship out, then you've got a lot of horn flies on those cows or those stalkers. And so the things to think about is you need to kind of implement some kind of treatment. One option is an insecticide ear tag that you can put in anywhere from April to June, and it should give you about 3 months of control in Oklahoma. And then of course you have a lot of products out there that are easy to use when you're bringing the animals up, such as pour-ons or sprays. And so if you have a pour-on product, it's a product that you pour directly down the back line of that animal, and it keeps the horn flies off or kills the horn flies that could be on that animal. If you think of sprays, you're going to have to bring those animals up and try to treat them in smaller groups. So if you have a group of 50 head, then you want to break those animals down into 10 head per group while you're treating them, because if you don't, you're not going to get very effective treatment. We do have a website that we post all the hornfly data from year to year, livestockbugs.okstate.edu, that they can go to and click on hornflies, and it'll show you previous year's hornfly trials that we have done.
Derrell Peel, our livestock marketing specialist, joins us now. Derrell, big news out of Kansas this week, that fire at the Tyson packing plant. Tell us a little bit first, just what happened.
On Friday, August 9th, a fire broke out in the evening at the Finney County plant for Tyson. It's near Holcomb, Kansas, just west of Dodge City. So the fire was a very major fire, burned well into Saturday. The plant, of course, is closed down at this point in time. So that's a significant impact on slaughter capacity in the country. That plant alone accounted for somewhere in the neighborhood of 5% of our weekly kill capacity in terms of the packing industry, the beef packing industry. So the immediate reaction was very strong. Live and feeder cattle futures were down, limit down early in the week. We saw an immediate reaction in box beef markets. Again, this disrupts both the flow of meat coming out of the plant as well as the ability to slaughter cattle on the purchase side. So those impacts were very huge early in the week. Those impacts will, some of those impacts will work their way out of the system fairly quickly, but the longer term impacts remain very unknown at this time.
Let's dive into those longer term impacts. Do we have any idea maybe what could happen and kind of how folks could just start planning for that?
Well, we do have some history a little bit like this. In fact, in that same area, on Christmas Day in 2000, a ConAgra plant basically burned to the ground. So a very similar event in a very similar region. That plant, initially the company said they would reopen that plant. Later they decided basically to just abandon it, and it never reopened. Again, Tyson has said they're going to reopen this one, but what that means exactly at this point I think is still unknown. But we do have some basis for that. For the broader market, it's really difficult to say how long these impacts might last. They will certainly come down from these initial effects, and that's probably the most important thing for the industry to keep in mind, is that you have these initial impacts that are very large. They reflect a lot of the uncertainty, and over time, as we get more information and also just as the market has time to adjust, we'll see those impacts gradually work their way out of the system.
With that scenario in mind, what kind of guidance do you have for producers?
Well, again, this has happened before. We've survived this before, so I guess the first thing is really don't panic. Obviously, some people are caught in the short run and just really can't do a lot to avoid the impacts of this. That's primarily going to be fed cattle that were scheduled to go to that plant initially and obviously aren't going to, so they have to be dealt with. The broader impacts, especially impacts down to the feeder cattle market level, is really just related to the overall uncertainty that's affecting the industry right now. So I would tell producers, especially feeder cattle producers right now, give it a little time. There may be some residual impacts by then, but I would say they're going to minimize a lot from what we're seeing here initially.
Okay, Derrell, thanks a lot. Keep us posted.
All right.
If I were to ask you to describe ketchup, you might say red, thick, salty, sweet, or tangy, but you probably wouldn't say fishy. But you might be surprised to find out that ketchup hasn't always been tomato-based. Trying to pin down the exact origin of ketchup is difficult. So some researchers have looked for clues to its beginnings by studying the derivation of its name. At the end of the 17th century, the earliest known occurrence of the word ketchup in the English language appeared in a publication called the New Dictionary of the Terms Ancient and Modern of the Canting Crew. And this seems to refer to either a preserved fish sauce or the brine of a pickled fish. This early ketchup was popular, but it was also expensive, which meant that it was inevitable that American and English cooks in the 18th century would attempt to come up with less expensive versions by substituting ingredients to reduce costs and to subtly tweak flavors to match the palate of domestic consumers. By the middle of the 18th century, the three major types of ketchup were fish, mushroom, and walnut-based. Tomato-based ketchups probably began to appear somewhere in the late 18th to early 19th centuries. Large-scale commercial production of ketchup began in the mid to late 1800s, both in Britain and in the US. The Heinz Company patented its first ketchup bottle in 1882. So the next time you reach for that bottle of ketchup to pour on your French fries, hamburger, or meatloaf, remember it's something of a world traveler. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or visit fapc.biz.
Well, wheat prices took a beating this week, falling 35 cents. So, Kim, what happened?
Well, the WASDE report was released last Monday. It did not meet expectations, especially with corn. The pre-release estimates had corn at 13.2 billion bushel production. It came in at 13.9. Now, wheat's been priced with corn, and as corn prices went down, so did wheat prices. In the WASDE report, they raised U.S. wheat production by 60 million bushels. The majority of that increase was hard red winter wheat, and the rest of it pretty much hard red spring wheat. So that caused more weakness in the wheat market. And then if you look at the hard red winter wheat protein level overall, around 11.2 to 11.3%. Oklahoma's protein was 11.4%. The market needs 12 to 12.5% protein, and so leaves something to be desired there with our wheat, and our wheat right now is being priced in the feed market.
We're always hearing about Russia and how Russia impacts our wheat market. Now, Russian wheat production came in less than expected, so why aren't wheat prices going up?
When you go back a couple months, we was expecting Russian production to be 2.85 billion bushels. It's right now at 2.68 billion bushels. Last year it was 2.64 billion bushels. So it's just slightly higher this year than it was last year, below expectations, but Ukraine increased production offset that decline in Russia. You look at the Black Sea, that's Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, their production come in right now at 4.23 billion bushels compared to 4.07 last year. Just so significantly higher production in the Black Sea than last year, even with Russia's expected production lower. You look at the exports, Russian exports are projected to be lower this year, 1.3 billion last year, 1.25 this year, so lower. But if you look at the Black Sea area, 2.2 billion compared to 2.25 billion. So 21 million bushels less exports. And so what we lost in Russia, Ukraine and Kazakhstan's making up for.
And it was also reported that Russia is negotiating with Saudi Arabia, so what kind of impacts is that going to have on our wheat markets?
That's going to have essentially a zero impact. Saudi Arabia buys most of their wheat from Germany. They're our 41st or somewhere in that vicinity importer of U.S. wheat. In other words, they normally import around 2 million bushels a year from the United States. That's insignificant.
Is there any chances that wheat prices will recover at all?
Well, there's always a chance, but you look what happened this week. We took that big hit in 2 days, and then we didn't even get a bounce out of it. It's just been wallowing around at the bottom of that prices. I think what bothers me is the futures, I think, has probably bottomed out. We still got a relatively strong basis. There's a possibility we could lose that basis strength and even lose more cash price. Right now, I expect prices to stay at this level as we digest the world crop coming in. We've had a report this week that European crops coming in above expectations. And so we got to wait till everything washes out. I think we'll probably get slightly higher, but I don't think we'll get significantly higher prices in wheat.
So with all that information, what should our Oklahoma producers concentrate on?
I think they've got to look at next year's, planting next year's crop. Plus, if they've still got wheat in the bin, selling at $3.60 to $3.70 is, that's pretty unpalatable. But however, you can sell that wheat if it costs about 6 cents a month storage and interest costs. For 21 cents, you can buy a December call option at the money. or you can buy a at-the-money call option for March for 25, 26 cents. That's storage. So if you'll spend your storage money, sell your wheat, lock in that bottom price, sell your wheat, buy a call, I think you need to consider that.
All right, thanks, Kim. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Wes Lee here with your weekly Mesonet weather report. Finally, a little bit of rain fell this past week outside of the Northeast region. This 7-day rainfall map from August 14th shows respectable amounts in the northern half of the state. As usual this summer, the Northeast logged the most rain, with Veneta coming in at 4.63 inches. But stations from Seminole to Arnett and north and west of there mostly received an inch or more. The week's rains were able to reduce the consecutive days without a quarter-inch of rain map down to just 4 orange areas as of Wednesday. Grady County's Acme continues to come in last on this race with 55 days without a significant rain. Light rains were not enough to impact 10-inch soil moisture conditions for most of the western third of the state. This fractional water map shows just how dry it is, with all of the red colors indicating the driest end of the scale. Something new starting to show up recently on these maps are the dry soils becoming an issue in the far southeastern counties as well. Unfortunately, the dry conditions are likely to persist at least a little while longer. The National Weather Service forecast for next week continues to predict lower than normal chances of precipitation for almost the entire state. Gary's up next with some additional drought information.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Now, the rainfall Wes showed us that fell over the past week, it was wonderful, of course, but was it enough to help our drought problem? Let's get straight to the new drought monitor map and see what we have. Now, the rainfall Wes showed us again was beneficial and wonderful and all those good adjectives, but was it enough to stop the drought? The new drought monitor says no. We do have an expanded area of severe drought across the far southwestern corner of the state, and look down in the far southeast, we also have a little blob of abnormally dry conditions down in that part of the state. So we're starting to get drought in most of the state, or at least the drought precursor of abnormally dry conditions. The only area safe so far is far northeastern Oklahoma, and we can show why on the 30 and 60-day rainfall maps. We see those oranges and reds and even the yellows across western Oklahoma, down into south central Oklahoma, but it also extends over there into southeastern Oklahoma. So we have some areas across the southern parts of the state that are less than 10% of normal over the last 30 days. And remember, we have had some pretty extreme temperatures over that same time frame. Now, the only reason we aren't seeing worse conditions would be that rainfall that we've seen off and on over the last 60 days. When we look at the 60-day percent of normal rainfall map, again from the Mesonet, we see that core area of severe drought down across far southwestern Oklahoma. That also extends up into central Oklahoma, and that's why we have the moderate drought extending up into that region. But we also see areas in north central and northwest Oklahoma around 50% of normal for that time frame, and also that little splotch down in southeast Oklahoma is also close to 50% of normal over the last 60 days. So we have got a little bit of a head start on the fall rainy season with some decent rains in August, but we need some more, and especially down across southern Oklahoma and even down in southeastern Oklahoma. That's going to be the key to stopping this flash drought and get us back into normal type situation. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Talking prescribed fire now, and the group of conservation professionals from around the country who are learning the latest and best techniques from OSU Extension. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon.
This is part of our patch burn research that we've had going on. This has actually been going on for 20 years, since 1999. So we burn the entire pasture in a 3-year period, but a third of it gets burned every year. Well, within that third, we burn half of it, or 1/6 of it, in the dormant season, so in the springtime, and then we burn the other 1/6 in the summertime during the growing season, so that gives us a third. As soon as there's a little bit of green pops up here, cattle in here, they're gonna move from the patch we burned right here, actually this spring. They're gonna be grazing right there and spending most of their time in it. So we're moving livestock, not with fences or anything else, but we're doing it with fire.
In Oklahoma, we use prescribed fire as a tool to help with land management, and that's why folks from all over the country have made their way to the OSU campus to learn how to burn.
Prescribed fire doesn't happen a lot in their states. Number two, growing season fires are kind of a foreign thought too in their states as well. So they're coming here and we're trying to teach them that and show them the benefits, its uses. Helps them when they work with landowners on helping them write conservation plans, fire plans. They can get increased knowledge within that, taking it back to their state, and hopefully they're going to spread that to other of their employees within their respective states as well.
So one of the reasons I came to this training was to be able to write burn plans for my landowners, and so being able to talk to them about what that burn plan is actually going to look like, and especially bringing in growing season burn plans to them, that'll be really helpful, and I can tell them that I've done it, I've been there.
They're not from big rangeland states, big grassland states, now, but they do have CRP. Most CRP contracts require that you burn, so we burn it, open it up, create more bare ground, remove that thatch. Then again, more different, bird species, animal species, wildlife, insects and stuff can start utilizing that and get it out of that stagnant kind of unproductive state.
Well, in California, the application is a little bit different ecologically because it's an annual dominated system. Most of our burning is for brush control and herbaceous weed control.
As you get out here, it really does change it, because someone can tell you growing season fires tend to be less dangerous than dormant season fires. They're not moving as quick, the flames aren't as tall, but still when you get out here, you see the flames going and it still makes you a little nervous, but doing the repetitions and seeing it out in the environment really helps you just realize what it's actually going to do.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.